A nun asked a grieving cowboy to marry her. Not for love, not for salvation, but for something even holier. Let me tell you why. If stories like this stir something quiet in your chest, if you've ever believed that faith can wear dusty boots and carry a crying child, then this one's meant for you. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the stories that matter. And tell me in the comments, do you think love can be holy even if it breaks the rules? I'll be down there reading every word now. Let's go back to the day she laid a marriage contract on a hay bale and changed both their lives forever. She gave her life to God, wore the veil like armor, and prayed until her voice turned to silence. But when a child died in her arms and heaven stayed quiet, she left the only world she knew, not out of anger, but because her heart whispered that maybe love, real love, was waiting somewhere dust-covered and wounded. She found him in a half-collapsed barn, grief in his eyes, dirt on his hands. And for the first time, she didn't offer a prayer. She offered herself. Not for romance, not for redemption, but for something even holier. She hadn't spoken in 3 days, not to the sisters, not to the priest, not even to God. Sister Mercy had spent 14 years behind stone walls, praying through silence, patching wounds, burying children too poor for coffins. Her hands had memorized the shape of prayer beads better than her own skin. But 3 days ago, a girl bled out in her arms, a child no older than 10. She died calling for her mother, and Sister Mercy had whispered the Lord's Prayer with a voice that cracked like dry timber. God didn't answer, not then, not the next morning, and not the night she screamed into her pillow begging for a reason to stay. So she packed. One satchel, a worn Bible, a crucifix carved by a boy who once called her Mama Mercy, and her old boots leather soft from years of chapel floors. The convent door creaked behind her, but she didn't turn back. Sister Mercy didn't stop believing. She just stopped waiting. Underscore, 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 underscore. The train was late. She stood on the platform in her black habit, sunlight pooling around her like judgment. A few men stared. One removed his hat. She nodded politely. A woman whispered, "She must have done something awful." Mercy heard. She didn't flinch. She wasn't running from God. She was walking towards something else, something real, something with hands that could hold, eyes that would meet hers when prayer failed. Underscore, 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 underscore. In the town of Redemption Ridge, there was a man who used to sing to the stars. A man who buried his son, then buried his voice. He drank more than he ate. Fixed fences no one asked him to. Said ma'am to ghosts in doorways. Sister Mercy had never met him. But she'd heard of him. The widow who ran the boarding house told her, "He used to smile. Now he just survives." Mercy didn't want to save him. She was tired of saving. But something in her soul stirred not duty, not desire, but a quiet ache to stop being holy long enough to just be human underscore 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 underscore. On her third day in town, she walked to his barn. Mud clung to her boots, sun on her veil. He was shoveling straw, shirt clinging with sweat. Grief settled in his bones like winter. She spoke first. "I left the church," she said. He looked up startled. Why, he asked. "Because I kept praying for God to send someone hurting enough for me to stay," she answered. "And I think I just found him." He dropped the shovel. And in that silence between a woman who had worn the veil for too long and a man who no longer believed in miracles, something holy began. If you're still here, maybe your heart feels what hers did. That quiet ache, that question. Can you walk away from everything sacred and still find something even more holy waiting if this story is pulling you in? Hit the like button. It tells me you want more stories like this. And if you've ever loved someone not because they were perfect, but because they were hurting, leave a comment below. Would you have stayed with him if you were her? I'll be down there reading your thoughts. Now, let me tell you what she did next, because her next words to him weren't "I love you." They were "Let's survive together." He didn't say a word. Not when she stepped through the barn door, not when she tracked mud across the floor, not even when she said she used to be a nun. He just stared like a man watching a storm roll in and wondering if it would pass or bury him. His name was Elias Cutter. Folks said he'd once been a good man, hard-working, soft-spoken. But ever since the fire that took his ranch and the fever that took his boy, he'd stopped being anything at all. He lived alone now, fixed fences that didn't belong to him, slept in a barn he no longer had cattle for, and prayed, if he still prayed at all, that no one would come asking for pieces he couldn't give. But Sister Mercy wasn't asking. She was offering. Underscore 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 I can cook, she said. Patch wounds. Clean what's broken. He leaned on the shovel, arms streaked with dirt and old pain. What are you doing here? She looked down at her boots, looking for something real enough to make staying feel like obedience again. He frowned. You still believe in God? She hesitated. I believe in people who've suffered enough to understand Him. Underscore 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 underscore. She pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket. Her hands trembled just slightly. I have no family, no husband, no child, but I have hands that know how to work, and a heart that's still beating even if it's tired. This isn't a love letter, it's a contract. He blinked. Marriage, yes, she said, but not the kind with roses and dancing. The kind with mended roofs, boiled stew, and a chance to raise a child who won't be afraid to be strong. Elias didn't move. But something behind his eyes, something that had long gone gray, flickered. She stepped closer. You're not dead yet, she said softly, but firm. And neither am I. Maybe God's not sending miracles anymore. Maybe we're supposed to become them ourselves. Underscore, 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 underscore. The barn was silent, save for wind howling through a crack in the wall. She laid the paper on a hay bale. "Sun sets in 4 hours," she said. "If you don't want this, I'll leave. No shame, no hard feelings." And then she turned and walked out her veil, catching the wind like a black flag. Elias watched her go, a jaw clenched, chest tight. He hadn't prayed in years, but now he found himself whispering one. Underscore, 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 underscore. At sunset, she found him on the edge of town, coat dusted with hay paper in hand. He held it out. She didn't take it, just looked him over once, boots, hands, shoulders that sagged from life, but still stood. "You sure?" she asked. "I'm not looking for heaven," he said, "but I wouldn't mind a roof. And someone who won't lie when it's hard." She nodded once. That night they shared soup silence and the strange warmth of two people who hadn't expected to feel anything again. Not love. Not yet. But maybe the start of it. Love doesn't always begin with a kiss. Sometimes it begins with staying. If this quiet kind of love speaks to you, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And tell me in the comments, have you ever stayed? Even when it hurt, now hold on. Because the night's about to fall, and when the first gunshot echoes, she'll reach for something holier than prayer, his hand. They didn't speak much after the paper was signed. She cooked. He repaired the roof. She mended his coat. He fixed the broken steps. They moved like two people surviving under the same roof. Not lovers, not friends, just two souls trying not to unravel. At night, she prayed in the pantry. He slept by the fire. Neither one asked why they kept the walls up. They already knew. Underscore, 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 underscore. Then came the night with the horses. It was near midnight. The wind was loud, but not loud enough to cover hooves. Not wild, galloping, measured, intentional steps. Elias heard it first. Sat up slow, reached for the rifle under the cot. She was already at the window veil, off, hair down, eyes sharper than any sermon she'd ever heard preached. "Trouble?" she asked. "Not the friendly kind," he said. She didn't flinch. Just walked to the door and grabbed the lantern. Then, without a word, she handed him the crucifix she'd always kept near the kitchen window. "If I die," she said softly, "return this to the convent." "You're not dying tonight," he answered. Underscore, 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 underscore. Outside, the world was too still. 3 riders stood beyond the fence line. One had a shotgun resting across his lap. Another held a rope like he meant to use it. The third was silent, his eyes meaner than the barrel aimed at their porch. Elias stepped forward, rifle in hand. Sister Mercy followed, not behind him, beside him. "You'd best turn around," Elias said, voice low. The man with the rope laughed. "We don't take orders from ghost folk and whores in habits." Elias didn't blink. Mercy didn't breathe. The shotgun clicked, and before thought could catch up, Elias fired. The shot rang out like thunder in a confession booth. One of the horses screamed and reared. One man fell. The others bolted. Then silence. Only the crackle of nerves and wind. Underscore, 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 underscore. Elias lowered his gun, chest heaving. And that's when he felt at her hand. Not pressed lightly, not tentative. She grabbed him, held on like the world had tilted. He turned his head. She was staring forwards, eyes glassy, knuckles white where they clung to his coat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. You're not sorry," he said. "You're alive." She looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, Elias saw not the nun, not the holy woman, but the human being beneath the vow. "I used to believe love came only from heaven," she whispered. "And now," he asked, "I think it might be standing next to me with a rifle." Underscore, 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 underscore. They didn't kiss. They didn't fall into each other's arms. But that night, for the first time, they didn't sleep apart. She lay in the bed. He sat in the chair, both facing the window, both afraid of what would come next. Not danger, not judgment, but the growing ache of needing more than just survival, of wanting to be held and not having to call it sin. Sometimes it's not the prayers we say, but the hands we reach for in the dark that save us. If that moment touched you, tap like and subscribe to stay with this story. And tell me in the comments, do you believe God can speak through something as simple as holding someone's hand? Because what comes next isn't a miracle from heaven, it's a life growing where neither of them thought love could live. The snow came early that year. Heavy flakes blanketed the hills before October had even ended. The barn creaked, the wind howled, and Sister Mercy, no longer in the habit but still praying when no one could hear, curled over the wash basin and vomited for the third time that morning. She didn't need a doctor. She didn't need confirmation. She knew what this was. Underscore, 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 underscore. Elias was chopping firewood when she stepped onto the porch, her face pale, her coat too thin for the cold. He looked up, startled. She hadn't left the bed in 2 days. "What is it?" he asked, already crossing the yard, already afraid. She sat on the porch step, and when he knelt beside her, she placed a trembling hand on his. "I think I'm pregnant," she whispered. Elias didn't speak, not for a long moment. His breath fogged in the cold. His hands, blistered and warm, tightened around hers. "Are you sure?" "No. But yes." Underscore 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 underscore. He sat beside her. Didn't flinch, didn't panic. But she did. I took vows, she said. I gave everything to God. I wore the veil for 14 years. I told people that heaven was the only home that mattered. He nodded slowly. And now, there's life inside me that came from this world. From us. And I don't know if I'm allowed to want it. Underscore 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 underscore. Elias didn't answer with words. He took her hand gently, firmly, and pressed it to his chest. You've given everything to everyone your whole life, he said. To God, to strangers, to children not your own. She closed her eyes. I never thought I'd be allowed to want something for myself, she said, voice cracking. Elias leaned closer. Maybe he said this isn't God punishing you. She opened her eyes. Maybe it's him giving something back. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, she lay awake, hand resting on her belly. No movement yet, just fear and warmth, and something terrifying hope. She whispered into the dark, God, if you're still listening, I don't know how to be both yours and theirs. I don't know if I'm still holy or just human now. But if this child lives, I swear I'll raise her to know both. Underscore 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 underscore. The next morning, Elias made her tea, burned the eggs, sat at the table like a man trying not to breathe too loudly. When she entered the kitchen, her face was softer than he'd ever seen it. Not broken, not saintly, just real. She slid into the chair across from him and reached out. I'm staying, she said. I didn't ask you to go, he replied. She smiled. I know. But this time I'm staying, not because I promised God, but because I choose you. She gave her body to God. But now, it's carrying something human, fragile, holy in hers. If that moment stirred something deep in you, hit like and subscribe to follow the rest of this story. And let me ask you, can a child born of love, outside the lines, still be part of God's plan? I'd love to hear what you believe. Because next, she'll have to choose not just what kind of mother she'll be, but what kind of faith she'll pass on. The child came early, 2 weeks before the spring thaw. The wind was fierce that night. Snow drifted high against the windows. The lanterns flickered like they might go out. Elias boiled water, laid out towels, and prayed not in the way he used to, but in the way you pray when the woman you love is screaming through clenched teeth and pain-wet eyes. Sister Mercy no longer wearing the veil, but still carrying the weight of it bit down on a rag to keep from crying out. She had once delivered children behind church walls, whispering psalms into women's ears. But this was different. This time, it was her body breaking open. This time, God was silent again. Underscore, 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 underscore. At 2:13 a.m. under the thunder of wind and one small, stubborn flame, the baby came. A girl, red-faced, furious, loud. Mercy held her to her chest, tears streaming freely now, not from pain, but from the shattering, soul-deep awe of it. "I thought I gave up heaven," she whispered. "But you gave me this instead." Underscore, 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 underscore. They named her Lila Mercy Cutter. Lila for the flower that blooms in storms. Mercy for the woman who finally forgave herself. Cutter for the man who taught her that staying was sometimes the holiest thing of all. Underscore, 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 underscore. Word got around town fast. Some folks shook their heads, said it wasn't right, a nun turning into a mother, turning into a wife. She broke her vows, they whispered. She was supposed to be sacred. But Mercy didn't listen. She'd spent half her life trying to be sacred, and the other half learning that sacredness isn't something you wear, it's something you protect. And she would protect this child. With her prayers, with her hands, with her love, and if needed, with her rifle. Underscore, 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 underscore. When the men came cousins of the one who once threatened them, she didn't flinch. They didn't come to talk. They came with torches and words like sin and unfit and unworthy. Elias stepped forward first, but Mercy stopped him. She stood on the porch, baby in her arms, firelight behind her. "If you came to burn something down," she said, "you're too late. I already let the old life die." "And what are you?" Now one man sneered. "A mother, a wife, a fallen woman." Mercy looked him straight in the eye. "I'm what God made me when the world tried to silence me," she said. "A woman who chose to love, and who will raise her child without shame." Underscore, 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 underscore. That night, after the men were gone and the fire had gone out, Elias held Mercy close by the window. Lila slept in the cradle Elias carved from an old wagon wheel. Mercy rested her head against his shoulder. "I used to think love had to be either holy or human, she whispered. And now, she smiled. A tired, full smile that reached all the way back to the part of her that once doubted everything. Now I know, she said, that real love is both. And in that moment, wrapped in arms, silence, and firelight, she believed it. Completely. This is a story about grace. Not the kind whispered from a pulpit, but the kind lived through blistered hands, broken vows, and love that grows in the soil of imperfection. Sister Mercy didn't lose her faith. She transformed it. She walked away from the veil, not to rebel against God, but to find him in a place the church never prepared her for, in the arms of a man who needed saving, in the cry of a child born from hope, and in the silence between heartbeats shared at the end of long days. This story reminds us that God doesn't always speak through thunder or scripture. Sometimes he speaks through a hand held at the right moment. A roof built in winter. A child who teaches you to pray again. The message is clear. Holiness isn't a prison, and love isn't a sin. When we dare to step beyond fear, beyond shame, beyond the limits others put on our faith, we may just discover the deepest truth of all, that God doesn't abandon those who long for love. He walks beside them even as they stumble into it. If this story stayed with you, then don't stop here. Our next story might just speak to another quiet place in your heart. Click the next video and I'll meet you there with another tale of love, faith, and the kind of strength that doesn't always wear a smile.